Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 131 of the Podcana podcast. This week, we're going to be going over all of the best decks within the current metagame. We're going to be recapping the Singapore DLC, also recapping the CCQ that took place in Wakefield in the UK this past weekend. I will say we're a bit later this week. We're getting the podcast out, but we really wanted to make sure we could have Thiago on. Very grateful to even have him on this episode right now, because I'd say he's absolutely dying after his travel back from Singapore. But yeah, before we jump into things, Thiago, like, just give us a high level breakdown of how you found your experience at DLC Singapore, and of course, congratulations on securing your very first golden Mickey.
Yeah, the trip to Singapore was super fun. It was definitely extremely tiring. Like, I think by the time I left home and the time I arrived at the hotel in Singapore, it was like 42 hours or something. And then I arrived there at 8 a.m. So like I couldn't just go to bed because then my sleep schedule would be cooked for the tournament. So then I had to like stay awake until like for another, I don't know, 16 hours after I arrived, traveling for that long. But the tournament was super cool. It was good to see so many people fly out to it from the US and Europe and all different parts of Southeast Asia. So yeah, it was really nice to be able to meet everybody from that area of the world. A lot of like Singaporean players who play different card games were like playing some Lorcana, and so yeah, it was just super fun, and yeah, very happy with the result, obviously.
Yeah, man, you absolutely crushed it. I was saying to you guys earlier, like, watching the DLC from afar, it definitely seemed like there was a lot of, good performances put in from both, EU and NA players. Again, before we kind of jump in, dive into your deck specifically and talk about the event a little bit more, can you give us just like your overall thoughts on the best of one format? Because, I mean, I know we probably don't have to spend too long on this because a lot of people probably have a very similar opinion. But was this the first time you actually played in the like high level tournament that was the best of one format?
It was. And so like I got there, I said I got there on Thursday. Like Thursday night, we decided to play like a locals tournament or whatever. There was like 40 people there. And so well, we played like 5 rounds. I played best of one there. My very first game of best of one, like I sit down, lose the die roll, look at my opening hand, keep Strength of Raging Fire, alter 6 cards, and then I draw Iago, Genie, Elsa, Demona. Like the cheapest card in my hand costs 4. I was like, oh, this is great. And so that was like my introduction to best of one. But so I played 5 rounds, a 5 round tournament on Thursday, a 3 round tournament on Friday, and then the DLC on Saturday. So by the time the DLC came up, I had already played some best of one. Um, and basically, I think that best of one can be fine, but I think playing 7 rounds of a DLC before the top cut in best of one is just like completely unacceptable. Like obviously the tournament like went fine for me, but like I think just in general, like the amount of rounds we played to be in best of one format is just completely not okay. I think it's like fine that the rounds go super fast and that like I didn't have any problem with that, like getting up after like 6 minutes or whatever. Like I think it was all fine. But I just think that we would need to have more rounds if we're doing something like that. Like a 400 person or whatever Swiss event would typically be 9 rounds. And the fact that we're playing 7 rounds of BO1, like we're playing like Swiss -2 is like so crazy. And I think that like tournaments cannot be like that moving forward for sure.
Yeah, super interesting. I agree. I hope that they try to change the format. I know it's a popular way to do things in a lot of the South Southeast Asia regions and like in Singapore and APAC and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I personally hope that they change it moving forward. But we will see. Time will tell. And Sky, you are attending an event this weekend. I believe it's Thiago is as well. It's the CCSCCQ taking place in Atlanta. How has your prep been going for that? Again, you don't have to say like the specific thing you've been playing, but maybe even talk about like how was your LCCC experience this week? You played against who did you play against again this week?
I played against Lucas Kalpa. He was playing the dogs, the Circle of Dogs type of reanimator shenanigans deck. That went really well. I won that one. It's a tough matchup. I don't want to play against dogs. The Circle of Dogs is a little bit better because it's a little bit slower, less aggressive. They don't have those roots to just kind of out aggro you. But he had some crazy stuff, like he Circle of Life, a Mufasa, and then he first trigger got a Gazelle to bring back Circle of Life. And then
Oh
he
my
also
God.
had like a Mufasa trigger to get like a Prince Philip, which was like the only thing that could potentially bring him back in the game. I still ended up winning that game, but it was like really like a crazy back and forth. I had to hit like 2 horsemen for 6 to like seal it off. Then he blew me out the other game. He had like a crazy opener with Circle of Life. And then the last game I went first. And if you go first in that matchup, like you can just go Cindy, Ariel, and then have one turn to kind of blow up 2 things and really just take them off singing for like the whole time pretty much. But yeah, my prep's been going well. I've played like a lot of games this format. Currently on rank 1 on the thing we do not talk about. Or I was rank 2 and I had lost my game to rank 1, but I played like a ton of games. They've been going super well. So
Cool.
I'm still between like a few choices and they're all like feel very good and like about equally as good. So, and it's funny because like the decks that I'm in between kind of feel like their matchup spread is about the same also, which usually doesn't happen. Usually it's like you're between 2 choices and you're kind of making a meta call, but these are like the trade-offs are so close that I'm like trying to still figure out the benefits of it. But yeah, it's been going well.
Awesome. Yeah, love to hear that. I'll just let people know as well. I was at the CCQ in Wakefield. I was 1 point off making day 2. Had a couple of ties, which sucked. They kind of count as losses essentially because we needed a 5-2 record to make day 2. But it was my first time playing Ruby Amethyst in quite a while. Really enjoyed the deck. I think ultimately my takeaway though is I just think that I think that Purple Steel is, as many people also probably agree with, an extremely powerful deck, an extremely consistent deck. I think it's one of the most consistent decks we've ever seen in the game, honestly. Just especially it's like considering the post-rotation format as well. It is just so incredibly strong. And it just performs at every single event. It's not to say, we saw Blue Steel do very well. We saw Green Blue do very well. So I think there's definitely options out there. But Purple Steel, honestly, just it seems way more powerful than Ruby Amethyst to me. Ruby Amethyst was a fun deck to play. A lot of cool things you can do. But I just felt like so unfavored going against Amethyst Steel. But anyway, yeah, that's nevertheless, the event was super fun. I was very happy to see Blue Steel take down an event. I've also been super busy with work, so honestly, since I've traveled and I've just like moved back home to Ireland, as you guys can see, I'm back in the old setup. So these past few days have been absolutely crazy for me. I am excited to start going back to my local, start playing more games, get ready for Set Champ season. And myself and Kim, we do have tickets for Richmond, so I think my prep is going to start back up over the Christmas period, and I'm going to try to start mastering a deck. Maybe that's green blue, maybe I'm just hopping on the Amethyst Steel train. But I really enjoyed Milwaukee, and I'm super excited to see everybody again in Richmond as well. But yeah, let's jump straight into looking at some of the best performing deck lists from this past weekend. As usual, we are promoting the Pro Play Summit, the PPG event taking place not this weekend, but next weekend in Orlando, Florida, from December 12th to December 14th. They have a plethora of card game tournaments taking place. Of course, they do have a 5K taking place on the Friday, a 10K taking place on the Saturday, which is the main event, and a 5K Infinity event on the Sunday. If you guys want to purchase tickets for this PPG Pro Play Summit in Orlando, be sure to check the link down below in the video description. It helps out the channel so much, and who knows, you might see some of us there as well. Okay, let's move on. Of course, I actually have to shout out again Heavy Play. Be sure to use code Podcana for 10% off on all of your Heavy Play products. But moving straight into the deck lists, Thiago, I'm going to pass this over to you. Jacob Frank taking down the DLC Singapore on Blurple. Jacob Frank, if I'm not mistaken, is a member of the Rare Hunters team, I believe. How much did you get to interact with them during the event? Obviously, like I know you came in the top 4. Did you end up playing against them at all, or did you just get to chat to them a little bit after the event?
Yeah, well, funny enough, going into the last round of Swiss, we were both sitting next to each other at 5-1 at like very bad tiebreakers, and so we were both pretty convinced that if we lose, we were going to be out of the top cut, and then both of us lost, and then it was just kind of like a decision that we made, like that if we're gonna play it out, like we don't really want to like ID into a low seeding in best of one tournament when so much of the prizing was top heavy. Like
Yep.
the prizing at Singapore was all pushed one forward. So like the top 64 prize in NA or EU is like the top 32 prize.
Yep.
You would be able to get a Mickey at top 8 in one of the Western DLCs, and you have to get top 4. Everything's push one. So you have to win, and it cuts deeper. It cuts top 64. So you have to win a lot of rounds in the playoff bracket to get good prizing. So we had both independently, one table next to each other, come to the same decision that we are going to play for seeding. And we both lost and both thought we were out, but then we snuck in at the 61st and 67th seed and 62nd seed. And so we both like made very deep runs as very low seeds after both like seeing each other lose and both thinking we were out.
Very impressive, yeah.
But yeah, he's a super cool dude. Very happy he was able to take it down. When we take a look at the list, we see he's playing a lot of things that we've come to see in these Blurple lists now. Like they're playing this Hades Woodchuck Guidebook Draw Engine, which I'm still not a fan of. I still think that it's like you're not taking advantage of a lot of the really powerful things that this color combination can give you access to. Things like second start to the right, things that really increase your deck's power level. But like these decks continue to succeed, so there's definitely something to it. He is playing the 4 copies of Thiago, which is a card that we've talked about a ton over the last few weeks on the podcast of how, in my opinion, the meta has been super, super soft to it. It's something that we'll see again when we take a look at my deck list. It's why I think decks like Red Purple have been doing super well. I think they're just really taking advantage of this card, whereas the other purple decks could be taking advantage of it, and they're choosing not to, and I think that it's hurting them. So it does not shock me at all to see a deck playing such a high count of Iagos doing well this weekend. And other than that, it's like a lot of really standard stuff. We do see him playing some more Cheshire Cats than are typical, but it makes sense when you have the 2 magical maneuvers and just the ability to keep recurring this ability. The like Bell moving damage effect several times is why we see it taking up one of the slots that we would typically see Bell taking. And other than that, it's like very, very standard what we've seen before. This Demone is an interesting card that some of the Blurple decks are playing around with. I think that a lot of the decks, when they play into Blurple, they need to play around cards like Madam Mim Elephant and Bell and Cheshire Cat, and so that leads them to freezing their board, which makes them really susceptible to Demone. And so I think that it's definitely a super strong inclusion. But yeah, I would like to see some more unfair things in how the deck opts to create card advantage.
Yep, that makes sense to me. Super interesting list. Congratulations once again to Jacob for taking down the event. Yeah, let's move on to your Purple Steel list. But I'll pass this to Sky because I know you guys are practicing a lot. And in general, regardless of, I mean, obviously you played extremely well, but Sky, like, you know, if you're talking about like the standard deck to beat, the deck that everybody's on, one of the most popular decks within the metagame, Purple Steel. Yeah, just give me your thoughts about it in the metagame right now. Like, we'll pass it over to Thiago to see, like, you know, maybe some of the matchups he didn't really particularly want to see. But for you coming against this deck, what are some of the key things you want to keep in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I played a lot against Purple Steel. I think if anybody's practicing right now, like half their matches are probably against Purple Steel. Even if that meta share doesn't get reflected in tournament, like what people show up with, but like that's what you're going to see when you're practicing, because everybody wants to beat this deck. Everybody wants to be prepared. And obviously some people are going to jump ship and try to take the advantage of, okay, I know I want to beat Purple Steel, so they don't play Purple Steel. But Purple Steel is just a crazy consistent deck that's just so good. Like you talked a little bit about Red Purple and playing that. The deck has its advantage in just playing a little bit bigger stuff. But, you know, when they have Strength of Raging Fire to take out your first big thing, that sets you back so far to where it usually offsets any advantage that you gain. That's why something like Hercules, I think, is actually, it's a clunky card, but it's actually kind of valid because it's one of the only things that you can guarantee to live versus Purple Steel and Strength early. So going like Hercules and Elsa maybe is the only avenue, like one of the only avenues that you have to kind of get back into a game where they hit their marks and have strength. Similarly, Blue Steel, like the aerial builds, I think are definitely the right way to play that deck right now, because it's one of the only things that you can untap with and use its ability next turn, unless they, like, I don't know, have strength plus Zeus or something, or double strength. And even then they're not gonna have 2 singers usually. So Purple Steel is just so crazy consistent, and even when it doesn't hit strength, like you're still doing like what you want to do, just minus one piece, and that's oftentimes enough to beat other people's curves, especially if they don't have their perfect stuff. So being a deck that like makes other decks have their exact curve to even have a chance to live versus like you just having one strength is like a crazy advantageous place to be. As far as like the list goes, I don't know. It's very similar to just like the standard list. The two Tinkerbell makes sense. I think in testing stuff like Timothy and Tinkerbell, they're just a little bit more aggro. Like having the option to slip that in has seemed very, very strong against decks that are a little bit slower. Just every little bit of lore with this deck counts. So if you can just like squeak in one or two, it might just be the difference to having like a Cobra get you there in spots where you're kind of behind or you're going second. Yeah, I'll let Thiago just take over the rest because it's his list and he played it. So I haven't practiced too much Purple Steel. I just know what it feels like to play against it. So
Yeah, I'll just add quickly as well that like when I played Red Purple versus Purple Steel, like it just really showed that the overstated bodies were just so much for me to deal with. Like all of these 4/4s. I think there was one stage in the game where like there was 2 giant Cobras and 2 Lexingtons against like my genies and my like every single thing that I did. If I wanted to challenge into their stuff, my stuff just like got banished, right? And it sucked. All of these overstated cards are like extremely powerful alongside all of the consistency, singing strength, drawing cards. And yeah, we can pass it over to Thiago. Just like talk to us about the Iago, right? You talked about that not many people are playing this, not many people are respecting it. And this is just another example. If they're really not respecting this, it's just another crazy overstated body just like puts in so much work.
Yeah, the Iago is definitely like the like thing that sticks out the most, I think, is something that I was really confused why people weren't playing so many answers to it in the meta, and it's something that I decided I very much wanted to exploit. So we see the deck kind of taking a little bit of a greedier, more awkward curve than we would typically see, just because I thought that what you would lose from having like a ever so slightly less efficient curve, you would like just make up for the couple percentage points you'd lose from that. The Iago just drastically overperforms because of how much it takes over the games when it's not answered. And it was one of the only ways to like play the mirror going second because typically like both players will curve out 1, 2, 3, and then the person who goes first now has the opportunity to sing Strength of Raging Fire first and take out the opponent's 3-cost character. So then when the turn is passed back to them and they enter their 4th turn, they won't have a singer to sing their own Strength of Raging Fire, and they get snowballed very heavily out of the game. But when you are in the situation and going second, you have the opportunity to play Iago on the 4th turn after they've already had the opportunity to sing Strength of Raging Fire. So in the Purple Steel mirrors where they don't typically play other actions to take out illusions, they already used their song before you had the chance to play Iago. So the Iago a lot of times comes down and is unable to get targeted with an action because the single action that they did have, they already used. So it's really helpful to give you an avenue to attack the matchup on the draw. So I think I would probably not play this list again. I think it was really just taking a look at what I expected the decks that I was playing against to look like. I think I was going into a meta that was, in my opinion, a tournament meta that was underdeveloped, and so it was soft to something like this. I think even if we just look at some of the other events that happened over the weekend, like the CCQ in Wakefield, where we saw some of these Sapphire strategies really, really dominating. Like they had green-blue having 6 copies in the top 16, 3 copies in top 8, whereas that was as much as Purple Steel and Blurple combined in each of those. I think it was maybe 7 Purple Steel and Blurple combines in top 16 and 3 combined in top 8. So we're seeing like places around the world like being able to adapt to attack some of these fair purple strategies, and I think that we're going to continue to see stuff like that. But ultimately, like I think what in the tournament I'm playing this weekend in CCS, like I'll probably play a list with like a more fair curve and maybe a less greedy card draw engine, and maybe cut one of these songs or something. Like I'll definitely make a handful of changes moving forward, but it was mostly just really trying to exploit what I thought some of the deck lists that I was going to be playing against were kind of soft too.
Yep. Apologies about my camera. I'm just gonna it's gonna go in and out during this video, so apologies about that, folks. But yeah, just like the one final question is like a very hot, like overview question, I suppose. But would you agree that you think that this deck is just still just like the most consistent deck, regardless? Like, again, I'm not saying there's other decks that can't beat this deck. I'm not saying there's other decks that aren't as good as this deck. But I mean, everybody knows you to play Purple Steel, right? Everybody knows how much of a fan you are of this ink color combination. But of course, I mean, myself, Sky, Zach, we all know how many decks you play, you test yourself. Obviously, you're playing like Brainiac and LCCC, which is like maybe a little bit more of a fun deck. Still a very, very good deck. But yeah, like, I mean, just like high level thoughts, like, would you agree that it is probably, I mean, of course, it's one of the best decks within the format, but it's just so incredibly consistent. And I think this weekend and all these terms we've seen, I just cannot iterate that enough, that you take any sort of form of Purple Steel to a tournament and you should do pretty well. You can always get edges. You can always put in certain text like the Thiago that Thiago made. But yeah, just like some brief overview thoughts of the deck overall this set.
I think that, like, in terms of consistency, yeah, Purple Steel is not touched by anybody. Like, when you bring Purple Steel to a tournament, you are so much more agnostic to the matchups you get, whether you win, play, draw. Like, in Singapore, it was a best of one tournament, so the die roll makes up 100% of the games you played, and I won a single die roll and lost 6, and then in the top cut was the lowest seed, so I went second for 5 top cut rounds in a row, and so, like, you are so much less susceptible to a lot of these things. However, I will say that, like, I have a huge incentive to be like, oh yeah, Purple Steel's like the greatest deck of all time, the boogeyman of the format. Like, if you're not playing Purple Steel, like, then you're just like trying to lose these games. I'll write a guide and then be like, everybody, if you don't buy my guide, like, you're just trolling. Like, you're not going to do well in tournaments if you're not playing Purple Steel and buy my guide. However, that is just so far away from my actual perspective. Like, I think that Purple Steel is able to attack these sort of metagames that aren't built for it, but I think that there's just so many tools that are strong against it, and I think as soon as in literally 2 days, like when CCS is played, like, we might already see some of the Purple Steel deck struggle. I think we're going to see a lot more, a lot better results from the blue decks moving forward. I think that Wakefield is just like just a sign of what's to come, and I think a very small amount of people will be able to have very consistent results with Purple Steel, but I think at the end of the day, the format is just so well suited to be able to deal with it with the cards in the format, and the holes that some of these big Sapphire strategies have are not super well positioned themselves. Like, a lot of these very slow Sapphire strategies can be susceptible to like these very hyper aggressive strategies, but those strategies are so held down by the purple decks that make up such a big meta share. Like, if you add Purple Steel and Red Purple and some of these other, like, even decks like Blue Steel and Blurple still have like somewhat good game into some of the super aggressive strategies, especially when they are going first. So those strategies are like pretty suppressed. And I would be very shocked if by the time Richmond comes around, we see a deck like Purple Steel being as dominant as it feels like it is right now.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting to hear your thoughts on that. Yeah. All right, yeah, let's move into the next deck, Sky. This is your specialty. This is Blue Steel. It took down Wakefield. A lot of interesting one-offs in here. It was very, very fun to see it on stream. I don't know if anybody was watching the stream, but the highlight of the show was definitely the Headless Horseman. It absolutely popped off many, many, many times. And yeah, very, very chaotic card. Very, very fun card. We were all memeing and laughing in the chat of like trying to figure out, they were like rolling dice and trying to like, decide obviously randomly how to discard the cards, and nobody could like decipher their method. It looked like they were just like throwing random cards about, but no, like, honestly, it was very,
to do that, because
yeah,
like, if you have one card, then it's just, all right, we roll for the one that I keep, and then you have to make sure they understand that, and then you have one.
As long as the players both agree, right? That's the main thing, right? But it was actually, honestly, not only were the games like really close and really entertaining, but it was just fun to watch. It was really, really, really fun to watch. So yeah, I mentioned last week that Kim also brought Blue Steel. She was on the aerial build. She had 2 copies of the JDC told me to call it bread. It's called bread, right? It's a better, I don't know. It's like the other. I'm
much faster.
I'm much faster, yes, but I'm much faster.
But I'm much faster.
Yeah. And it's the
people are calling it bread.
Yeah.
He's got love
The
for
baguette card.
Yeah. So
baguettes.
yeah, ultimately Kim, it wasn't really Kim's day, but she said when she played that card against the Amethyst decks, they had no idea what was coming, right? It's like it's very much a card that can really take your opponent by surprise.
Yeah, it's a good card. I think it's a
Yeah.
solid inclusion with Ariel for sure.
Yeah, compared
this
to like
Blue Steel
Ink Runner
build-
as well, it's similar to Ink Runner, right? And I've seen a lot of Blue Steels play Ink Runner. The difference with the Ink Runner is they can kind of expect it to come down, right? You basically have to have 3 extra ink available in order to do it, whereas the song card can really take your opponent by surprise. But yeah, sorry, I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of the inclusions
No,
in
no,
this
you're
deck.
good. I'll start with Ink Runner too because it's kind of interesting. So
Yep.
I think even Ariel builds, I think you can still play 2 Ink Runner and it's might be better. It's very close actually because obviously it's nice to have the extra song. Sometimes if you're playing like a Captain Hook, the but I'm much faster catches people off guard. You can take a favorable trade to a Genie or an Elsa, or even the Mulan can do the same thing. But yeah, the Ink Runner is pretty good. It's just what turn do you find yourself playing? And I guess if you're playing Ariel and you go like a turn 4 Ariel after Cinderella, you get potentially up to 8 ink next turn because of the ramping. Assuming they didn't take out your Cinderella, you could play Ink Runner plus like hard cast any song and then trigger Ariel, pay the 2. That's fine. It's just much worse than like playing a character and singing a song and then triggering the Ariel. So if you play something like an Amari or a Tinkerbell or another Ariel or a Goliath, so it's kind of just like a card like where do you fit this like in the curve, and it's probably just turns after when you're doing something similar and you can actually fit in like a character plus the Ink Runner plus the whatever the trigger on the Ariel, or just a character plus the Ink Runner is fine too. But yeah, it's close with that. I'm back and forth. I tried builds with lots of the bread card and just heavy into Ariel, and I've tried builds with 2 Ink Runner, and they both like felt valid in different ways. Obviously, the extra card from Ink Runners is very nice, and as a top deck, the bread card does not draw you a card, so it's not a good top deck at all. But it's also easier to fit the but I'm much faster with Goliath if you're trying to pare down your hands. But you're not always going to get value with that. So and they're both inkable. It's interesting to see stuff like Beyond the Horizon without Ariel. I'm hesitant to even run Beyond the Horizon with like full on Ariel build. I've kind of warmed up to it a little bit, and I think it might be right as like a 2 of or a 1 of. But without Ariel, I don't think I would even think to run it at all. It is, I guess it makes sense in the way that, if you're not going early Goliath after a Cindy, if you're going the route where you're playing like a princess and using just the 2 cards you get off of Cinderella as your card draw engine, it makes sense that you're going to, maybe just still get up to those high inks and have enough characters to sing and have the benefits and like, not have to use Goliath at all. And that's just your draw engine. Just like draw 2 cards off Cindy twice in a row, and then I have Beyond the Horizon to finish it. But yeah, this looks solid. The one of Arthur is funny. Arthur was always a card that I was like, I think one of them was actually correct, and then like Blue Steel is finally good, and I think it's actually not correct because of you have to play 4 Hades, and if you're playing Beyond the Horizon, you just have so many big clunky things, and even like Zeus can be like a clunky thing, and we're playing that on top of Spooky Side. So that's like the one weakness that I see with this list is that it's really really clunky. Like
high uninks as well. I want to say like there's like 18 uninks I think in this, which is definitely a lot.
Yeah, really, I would not be comfortable taking this to an event. I think you have to like choose between something like Spooky Side or Beyond the Horizon. Like I said, even then, I'm not always comfortable because, the games where you have Goliath, if you have any of these cards, you're not going to be able to pitch them at all. You might just take a turn to like play a Spooky Site and take one thing off the board or something, and just so you can draw an extra card with Goliath, which is really bad and something you always want to avoid. But yeah, Headless Horseman's great. I think there's versions of the deck that I play without Headless Horseman with heavy Ariel, and I favor just going my Cindy lives. I just play double Princess, and just that's enough removal. I don't need to play Headless Horseman because anytime where you have cards in your hand, you usually have something like very good alongside Headless Horseman that you want to retain, whether it's like a 6 cost or a Hades is the big one, or a Vincenzo. So you always want to cap off with Headless Horseman, and if you have an engine that's big enough to where you're never going to fully get down to that one card and be in that spot where you're just top decking, then you don't really need to worry about Headless Horseman. But he's such a good disruption piece. Like versus green blue, he's like fantastic. It's like one of the only ways where you can go super long against that deck and be safe against the combo. He doesn't always hit it, and sometimes they'll still have like a vision plus 1 of the combo pieces and they can still do it. But just having that option is super nice. So especially when they're like there's plenty of games where they get down to, like 2-3 cards, and they're clearly holding their combo piece, and it's like that's when it's really going to hit and mess them up. So I think it's probably correct to play in no matter what version, 4 aerial or no aerial. Definitely no aerial. You want to play heavy, but the other interesting thing here is like Kita is something that sticks out to me. I think with the aerial builds, I've favored putting Kita in just as an extra thing to play, that turn 5 after you play aerial. It's a princess that triggers Cindy, so if she lives, she could get another trigger off of her, and it's cheap enough to where it's like Namario, you can still sing a song and pay the 2 while establishing a character. And having ward is pretty nice. Like against green blue, not being able to bounce it is nice, and it also has the added effect of ramping you, which is good in that matchup anyway. So I think it is correct to play some counts of Kita. And the Pluto is the one thing that I think is probably just like really incorrect. I don't really see where in this style of deck Pluto can kind of shine. Like maybe if you're turning the corner and like want to put a clock on your opponent, but I think you kind of, instead of doing that most games, you just take off their everything. Like you get to a point where you have just such a critical mass that if they ever quest out, you're going to take out everything. Like, and maybe you have one removal in hand. But I'd be curious to see your guys' thoughts on the Pluto, because to me it just doesn't make sense in this style of deck.
I mean, also, I would agree that for the most part it doesn't really make too much sense, but it's also the extra ability that when you play another steel character, you can banish chosen item. I'm not saying they're playing this just against the Chromacon, but like there's an argument to be said that like that is probably the most key item in the metagame at the moment. So, and honestly, when you're playing against,
you can kind of also get them on that.
When you're playing against dogs, right, and you're playing like one big body per turn, that's probably removing something that makes them trigger their Chromacon to then bounce it back. Like, I don't know, if I had Pluto and I knew I was against dogs, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll probably try to. I don't know if I'd like keep it, but it's a card I could see maybe helping out in that matchup a little bit, but I still don't know if it's like worth, just because dogs is a deck that exists.
Pretty sketchy.
Yeah,
like, the odds of you having it in the spot, like you have Dig in this deck with like Vision, and he is pretty cheap, so there's be turns where you have 7-8 and can be able to Vision and grab him. But like usually in those matchups, if you're like in a spot where like you can take a turn off to play a character that doesn't immediately do anything, like even Tinkerbell does something immediately. If it doesn't kill anything, it threatens to take out 2 things the next turn.
Yep.
And also, like at that point, if you have 7-8, you probably have to play like a Hades or something, and Hades doesn't trigger the Chromacon. So there's plenty of like removal that, like if you're able to take a turn to play just a vanilla character, it's probably you're in a decent spot.
Yep. I had so much trouble against Chromacon this weekend. That's why one of my games went to a tie. I'll give a shout out to Jordan. I think Jordan was in one of the podcasts with you, Thiago. He was on like the Dogs Circle of Life build. I think if I had one more turn in the end, I would have won the game. But I just kept like play Horseman, bounce Horseman back to my hand, replay Horseman. Like I think I had like 3 Lumieres on the board at the stage and was like trying to take stuff out, like double Chromacon. It's so funny. Chromacon's that type of card where if they're playing a Dogs deck, as soon as they drop the Chromacon, it's like, okay, let's add 30 minutes onto this game. That's just literally how it feels most of the time.
Yeah,
but
every time that somebody plays a Chromacon, you just feel so hopeless. You're like, okay, game's over. And then like you just slowly, all right, claw it back. All right, I'll take one thing out. You can bounce one thing, and then
you have to do it correctly, right? Like one wrong move, and you're completely lost with the Chromacon. But yeah, Thiago, before we move on to the next deck, do you have any thoughts on the deck, or I think we covered it?
Yeah, I have a question for Sky. Obviously this deck, this archetype makes all of its money like in the like mid stages of the game where you're deploying all these 5, 6, 7 cost characters, most of them removing something that the opponent does. But the deck has seen different evolutions of how it plays the early game to get to that point. And so we've seen these decks like playing Captain Hook and playing Mulan, and then changing the numbers, playing 4, and then playing 6, and then playing 8, and then changing how they split them, and then sometimes playing in spooky sites. And it seems like a lot of the lists have opted to settle on 4 Mulans and 0 Captain Hooks, which was almost like the very, very first way that the deck was built. And they're frequently playing like 2 copies of Spooky Site as well. So what do you think about that direction that the deck's going in?
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna be greedy with the uninkable count, I'd probably favor something like Mulan. I originally just like had Mulan only like this list does. I'm kind of trending away from that though. Like I think I'd rather cut Mulan completely than play any copies of her right now, or like 4 copies. I think Captain Hook just does a lot more that Mulan just can't. Like if you look at the dogs deck, something like 0-3 Lady, being able to hold that up for one turn can be huge. Or even just Mulan trading into some of the other one drops that Captain Hook would survive and like, make them hit back for one turn. Like that's 2 to 3 lower in those situations, making up 4 is like massive. And also Purple Steel, it does different things as well. Like Mulan can, hit a Black Heron for 2, and then Tinkerbell can clean that up. But if you're playing a build with Aerial, that's not really the route you're going for like you used to. Like Tinkerbell's fine, but if you're going second, it can just get strength right away because you're obviously not removing anything on the board before. So like being able to play a 6 cost that's going to for sure live, and then play around having a removal plus the trigger off of Aerial is like much safer and it's felt much better in that matchup. So playing with something that plays into that strategy a lot heavier and better, it seems like the way. So I don't know, like Mulan having the filter and being able to trigger Cindy is fine also, but if you're playing like an Aerial version with stuff like Kita and Amari, like you're always gonna have like enough princesses that you want to play on curve. It's just, did you hit them or not? It's not like you're not running enough. It's just the odd time where you didn't hit after you played an Aerial. So I think I'm favoring Captain Hook right now. Like it also is something where you could play 4 and 2. There's plenty of matchups where you just need to hit a 1-drop, and if you hit your good curve alongside that, no matter if it's Mulan or Captain Hook, it's good enough. So I think playing like 6 seems right, but I definitely favor Captain Hook over Mulan currently.
Do you feel like Spooky Sight's needed against the like Amethyst Steel decks with like all of these 4/4s and stuff running around in general?
I think people have gotten a lot smarter about when to go wide with like 1 and 2 cost more in Purple Steel, and that like people know when to not commit to a 4 cost on turn 4. With that being said, though, I don't think it impacts enough to like include the super clunky card. If you're meta calling for dogs, I'd say then go for it, because that is a card that can actually affect that matchup. But they also have Ursula and Mowgli, so they can kind of take the angle to just rip through your hand, and like say Ursula takes a song first and then Mowgli comes and takes the Spooky Sight. It's like feels really bad. And even if it doesn't take Spooky Sight, like that's 2 cards gone, and they're oftentimes playing 7 copies of these cards that can discard. So like I have a similar like quarrel with Under the Sea and Green Blue. Is like, okay, well, this is one of the only ways I can feel confident on the draw versus this really bad matchup in this deck that can just roll over me. But they could just have Ursula and rip it anyways. So like, why am I playing this clunky uninkable card that like I'm gonna kick myself in almost every other situation? So I personally don't see Spooky Sight being an inclusion. I think if you want to go something that's a little bit lower to the ground, like if you're wanting to have more game into stuff on the draw, I think you just go Captain Hook. It's an inkable 1 cost that fits in. You can fit it in better with like Goliath when you're trying to pare down your hands. There's plenty of curves where it's nice to fit that in, and also you can just go for it on the play. And it feels better playing 4 of that card versus like a card that's 2 of it. Like, yes, you need Spooky Sight later, but that's not that many extra cards compared to a 1 cost that you play, on your curve. So
yep, makes perfect sense. All right, yeah, let's God, the mob song. Yeah,
the mob song, dude, this is sick.
Kim was talking to me about the mob song. Wasn't she talking to you about the mob song, Sky, as well before? I think she sent you a list.
She was talking to me. She sent me a list with the mob song, and yeah, that's why I included it, because after I made fun of her last week, it ended up getting top 16 at the DLC, and so I am here to issue my apologies and
formal apology to Kim.
I'm so sorry that you removed it from your deck for Wakefield. You were right, and the rest of us are wrong, and we're so sorry.
Mob song is sick. I have like thought about this card before, like before I went heavy into Aerial, but like it kind of makes sense. Like imagine you just go Cindy into Aerial, and the next turn you just double sing Mob Song and get a trigger. Like you're just taking out everything on the board. Like it's just a complete game over. But yeah, it's kind of clunky, unfortunately.
It's cool though. It's a cool idea for sure. And if there's any deck you want to play it in, it's like probably the song based deck. Yeah, I mean. The other card that's different in this deck, right, is the Jasmine in here. This deck seems to be really capitalizing on, after I do my Cindy, I really want to hit a princess, which I kind of respect. I mean, it also kind of makes sense if you're playing a lot of these like clunky stuff. I don't think you ever want to be ever want to be casting the mob song for 10, but you're just playing this like these big bodies. I think this Jasmine at the end of the day is basically like a big body. It's like most similar stats to something like a Madam Mim Elephant, which we've seen just stat wise anyways. It's like pretty good within the metagame, just a 3/7. You have the option to potentially buff this up as well. So would you say, like, out of all of the princesses in the game, at least in my opinion, looking at this, these are probably the best ones that just fit into the curve after playing your Cinderella?
Yeah, I think so. Like, obviously, you want to play Ariel after Cindy the
Yep.
most, but it's like, what do you do next that can trigger Cinderella? And your options are Kita, Namari, or Jasmine, or another Ariel if you want to go Ink and go to 8s. So I think the Jasmine's perfectly fine. I actually do want to test Jasmine a little bit more. I think I've discounted it off a little bit and favored Kita a little bit more, but I think the curves where you go like Ariel and follow it up with a Jasmine are like perfectly valid as well. It's just another big body that's not going to get taken down like ever. So, um, like I don't know. It's not like super necessary because they're not going to take out Ariel either. But like, is it better than Kita stat wise for like a lot of matchups? Probably. Like it threatens evasive stuff too. So like if there's a genie that you can't take out with an Ariel because it's paying for 3, and you'd rather just take out 2 small things and then just give them their genie the next turn because it can't sing a strength for it to do anything. It threatens to just be powered up and take that out. So I don't know. The Jasmine's like interesting. I think they're also the aerial builds play plenty of like evasive answers. Like if you're playing the bread or if you're playing the ink runner, you don't necessarily need it, but like there's probably some sort of density of like 4 to 5 cost princesses that go along with this curve enough to where it might be worth running 1 or 2 of.
Makes sense. Yep. All right. Next deck is Ruby Amethyst. This is a deck from the Singapore DLC, and yeah, there's a card I saw. I think I might actually know this player. Is this the player you played against on stream, Thiago?
Yeah, this is a deck by Chris Oyola, multiple-time Golden Mickey winner, who I played against in the top 32, where I did eliminate him, but it's a new take on Red-Purple, very similar to some of the other builds we've seen, playing the Maui Half-Shark and Next Stop Olympus, though, and basically these 2 cards in combination allow you to really whittle away at your opponent's board and gain a ton of lore in the process. On his, I think, turn 8 against me on stream, we saw him play Demona, exert my entire board, and then take out 3 or 4 characters and gain like 8 lore or something out of nowhere. And so it's really utilizing the fact that Demona exerts your entire opponent's board and really turns on your Maui Shark Olympus combo.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. And the one of medallion weights, I literally remember being in the car driving up to Wakefield, and like I put a couple of one-offs on my deck. Like I put in like a one of Vanellope Von Schweetz, which we can see Chris is playing here, and I tried in like I think I played a 1 copy of the Moana, the 4 cost 4/3 evasive. It was like a bit of spice, maybe it'll do some good. And I was sitting there in the car and I was like, medallion weights has to find a place in this deck. And I was talking to one of my friends who was driving us up there, and he's a big time, shout out to Josh, he's a huge fan of Ruby Amethyst, especially old Ruby Amethyst back in the day. And he's like, bro, every time I want to play this, it's like, yeah, I'm going to play it. It makes sense. And it's like, everybody else, like, bro, stop being stupid. Just like, take medallion weights out of your deck, play some good cards. He's like, bro, it has to be a good card. It makes sense. So, I mean, did you feel like it did some work in, again, as a one of, I also think it's fine. Like, did you think it was pretty impactful in any of the matchups you played against Chris, or it was just fine?
Well, so when we were playing in top 32, it was still best of 1, so we only played a single game, which is ridiculous, but he did actually play it. And on that turn 8, he could have used Demona to exert my entire board and then activated his medallion weights on his Maui Shark to draw 3 cards as he challenged 3 of my characters, and he could have challenged a 4th if he would have liked to and drawn 4 cards. He elected not to and just used it on his Lumiere to do a single challenge and draw a single card. But it is certainly a card that has a lot of applications. I think in general, Ruby Amethyst is a deck that was able to really capitalize on the fact that people weren't prepared for it, and it was a deck that was using 4 copies of Iago and 4 copies of Demona, which are cards that were really well positioned in the meta. And since other decks weren't doing it, they weren't having the same success as Ruby Amethyst was, whereas those cards very naturally fit the strategy. But I think as the meta has progressed and as people have learned to play against Ruby Amethyst, and as people have realized they can just play these cards in other Amethyst combinations, I think that the deck has really not had the same amount of power as people had anticipated it might before. And so I think adding this Shark Next Stop Olympics combo to really help you against some of the other Amethyst strategies is a direction that the color combination is going to need to go to. I just think that having 4 copies, one of the center piece cards in the deck is the 5-cost Headless Horseman, as well as the Demona. And so the way that these two cards interact with each other, since the Demona needs you to clear your hand out before playing her, and the Headless Horseman is an uninkable card that you want to deploy exactly the turn before you play the Demona, it leads you into these game states where you're really trying to have no other options in your hand as you're going into your 5th and 6th turn, so that you can develop the Headless Horseman and then next turn just ink the card you draw and develop the Demona. But that, in my opinion, leads to, when those are two centerpiece cards of your strategy, it leads to your deck being extremely fragile because your opponent can now just try to delay giving you a strong Headless Horseman target. So if they just have a 1-cost on turn 1, and then from turns 2 to 4, every single character they play has more than 2 attack, they can kind of strand your Headless Horseman in your hand and force you to just play it on their like Palace card or whatever, because your other option is like, let's say you top deck a random 3-drop, like if you're just going to play Sisu on turn 5 and pass and not ink a card because your 2 cards in hand are Headless Horseman and Demona and you have 4 ink, your options are either like ink your Sisu and play your Headless Horseman on pretty much nothing, so that next turn you can still try to play the Demona, or you have to like play your 3-cost, not ink to 5, so that next turn you're not threatening to ink to 6 to play the Demona. Basically, if your opponent just doesn't give you a genie or something to play your Headless Horseman on curve, your strategy becomes really inefficient very quickly. And so I think that a deck like this that's so fair and tries to play such a like normal mid-rangey game plan, being so fragile in the way that your 5-cost Headless Horseman plays, is why ultimately I don't think that the deck is really, really one of the top contenders. So I think Chris is one of these players who every single time he does well, he has like some very interesting vision for how a popular archetype is supposed to adapt in the metagame. And I think that this Maui Shark Olympus combo is a really, really savvy inclusion. And I think that some of the other Ruby Amethyst strategies should be adopting this, because I think that the other strategies are, in my opinion, falling short a bit.
Makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, everything you said about the Horseman is exactly what I felt playing my games. Honestly, it was it felt really bad where the Horseman like really needed to come down, and I'm playing a Amethyst Steel and they play like a Heron into a Lexington into, I don't know, like even the Cheshire Cat, like another 3-drop, and it doesn't even matter. It just sucks.
Every single turn that they delay playing their genie is so much more devastating for the Ruby Amethyst player. If the Purple Steel player just plays a Dumbo or a Niago or a 3-drop instead of their genie, every single turn that they're able to delay their genie one more turn is just really, really devastating for the Ruby Amethyst player, and makes their turns way more inefficient than it is for the Purple Steel player who is just, floating an ink to play a 3-drop on turn 4 or something like that.
100%, yeah. All right, let's move on and look at the Dogs deck from the top 4, CCQ Wakefield. Sky, let me tell you, people are loving our card. I think we got the best card reveal from set 10. I don't know what to tell you,
They keep sneaking in the list, dude. I love to see it. Like, I think what we talked about when we revealed it was just like, this card, if there's any Under the Sea style deck in the format, like, it might be good enough to just take off one extra thing. Like, usually Under the Sea takes off like 2 things in a situation where you're playing it. So like, being able to take out like one extra thing could like be the difference between like sealing up a game or not. It also draws a card, so it's fantastic. So I think it makes sense if you're going to play Dogs and have Under the Sea in the deck. I think it makes sense as like a 2 or 3 of.
Yep, and everything about this is just like pure Dogs. We've even got the 2 of Raja in there, which is like a super decent body. Everything else in the deck though, the
4/4 Ursula Mowgli line is interesting. I've seen a lot of people cut down to 6 copies between the 2. I really think like it's a card that does better in numbers, because if you play the first one, you rip something, and it's like, well, I know if they don't ink this critical part, like I'm gonna play Mowgli and rip the others. So it makes sense that you want to full commit to 7-8 copies in my mind. I do think there is an interesting build of Dogs that decides not to play any of this extra Under the Sea stuff. I'm not sure my complete thoughts on it. I'd have to play more games, but maybe the Delamoon's library like helps enough to where Under the Sea, hits stuff, because there's not a lot of pure targets for Under the Sea to hit currently in the meta. There's no Amber Steel really. There's not a whole lot of Dogs, so I don't think I would necessarily tech for the mirror. Obviously, Under the Sea still hits Genie and hits their 1 cost and stuff like that, but that's not really the way I don't think you win those matchups. So I would be curious to see some of these games and how they play out and how they use like the Ducks to with Under the Sea to get back in the game. I guess you're trading off like with the high cost unankable Under the Sea with a Chromacon. I think if you're not playing Under the Sea, most people are playing 4 Chromacon. So like that's not that big of a trade off, and sometimes Chromacon is even clunkier than Under the Sea in certain spots. So yeah, it's interesting. Like I've seen plenty of games where somebody draws like a second Chromacon, it like does like nothing. So like they kind of just lose, but Under the Sea might have a little bit more utility than the 4th Chromacon.
It depends, yeah. I just think there's so many. It's so cool how many different versions of like Amber Emerald exist right now. Like you've got like a very like you've got like a dogs deck like this that runs some Under the Seas. Then you've got like I would say a pure dogs list that just is all aggro for Chromacon. Then you've got some dogs lists that are still on a lot of the dogs package, have a couple of Chromacon, have fit in like the Circle of Life and Surfer Stitch. Like that's one of the decks I played against. And then you've got what I would say Dan's build is that I played against in the LCCC, which is like a heavy Circle of Life combo deck with like Clarabelle's, Prince Phillips, Surfer Stitches, was even playing the Shanty. Which
sure, I think
yeah, go ahead.
I think they all have like valid ups and downs. The weird thing about like the Circle of Life is okay, it's a lot more value, so you can kind of go over top some strategies and like last longer, but you're trading off the hyper aggro angles, and like a lot of those matchups you do, like if you just go hyper aggro, it's their worst matchup. So like why would I want to play Circle of Life when I can free up that matchup by just playing triple 1 cost into just more aggressive stuff? Yeah, I don't know. I think I would personally favor not the Circle of Dogs list. I think it has a element of like liability, and the payoff is just really not there for when it doesn't fire off. Like just having your early curve be much worse, and then like not getting there some of the time, it just feels really bad. One interesting thing though that I'm noticing is that this person's not playing the Shift Webby. What are your guys' thoughts on like Shift Webby in like an aggro style of dogs deck? Because I've seen people play it and I've seen people not play it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those cards that like you can play. I think, of course, the card is like best in the matchups where you're already good in. I typically would like rather see a couple copies of it. Like I think you don't need to play this many copies of the 3-cost lady, and I'd probably play maybe like 7 of these discard cards. So like I'd look to add a couple copies instead of like maybe a lady 3 and an Ursula or something like that. But overall, I think the deck's like perfectly serviceable without it. I think this Della Moons card is like honestly kind of insane in this deck. Like you have so many good singers for it between like the Mowgli and Ursula and the Raja and like the 2-cost Tramp. And like a lot of times you just play out Go just to like thin their early game board, and so you have like such good singers for it, and then just playing this on a card like Calhoun or something and being able to like win some of the games where you don't have the 7-cost Tramp, like just playing this normally and then questing into their board and then topping it off with a Chromacon or 5-cost Uninkable Lady is like a lot of the times just enough to get you over the hump. And so I'm not that big of a fan of Under the Sea in the strategy. It is of course nice like in some matchups to play it super early, but the Della Moons card on its own is like kind of insane.
Yeah,
it's also an Iago and / Cobra answer too, which are 2 cards that can kind of value trade the heck out of this deck if they're going second. So that's kind of a nice bonus
for sure. Next deck is the second place green blue deck at the CCQ in Wakefield. Yeah, I mean, I heard one of the casters saying like, "Oh, John Silver, a bit of spice," and I'm like, I wouldn't call John Silver spice necessarily myself. It's very much a card that was very prevalent in the deck last set, and I would kind of more so say spice is something that we haven't seen before, but John Silver is definitely something we have seen before. But I'm curious to still see it included within the deck because, just thinking about what matchups it might help out against. It definitely helps out against any of the more aggressive matchups. Curious to hear your thoughts on how you think it fares against a lot of the Amethyst stuff, I guess, in general, because everything else in this deck is pretty standard from what I'm seeing. So I'll pass this to you, Thiago. Maybe just your thoughts on John Silver versus like purple steel, red purple, and maybe even any of the blue matchups that you want to mention.
Yeah, I think he's like very mid. I think it's like one of those cards that in some applications it ends up like looking super strong, and it can certainly win you the game against some of the aggressive leaning purple strategies. I just think that in general, that's not typically the game plan that you want to beat those decks by doing. I think it kind of makes sense when you're playing for Cinderellas because you kind of want to like six
Get the
cost
six
cards to
drop,
curve
right?
into,
Yeah, yeah.
but it ends up being kind of awkward. Um, I know is a card that Ed added this weekend. He said it was horrible. He was playing 4 copies of it in his top cut finish in Singapore, and he said it was awful. And so I'd probably just listen to him and not play it myself. But I think it is like best against decks that are like not really in the meta, like Amber
Yep.
Steel or
Yep.
something like that.
Yep.
And so I think a couple copies is fine. I think situationally it can be good, but I think it's not typical. The way you typically beat Amethyst Steel is by, you know, compounding all of your big card draw cards like your Shift Clarabelle with some
Mm-hmm.
of these super efficient removal cards, and then overloading their hand. Sometimes with multiple like Donald Duck Gentleman, or and then eventually constructing the Prince Philip board wipe combo in your hand, and less so about just trying to race them and winning their board by giving people reckless.
Sure. Would you have any recommendations of something to swap to, Sky, besides this two John Silver? I think a very easy thing to mention here is like, right, you could just do the 4 Mother Knows Best, right? Like we've seen kind of Ed basically go for those before.
I mean, 4 Mother Knows Best is great. I think it, 3 and 4 copies is perfectly fine, but I don't think that would be a substitute at all. The problem with running a card like John Silver, and like you kind of have to, like, if you're going for this like crazy, like always want Clara shift, there's just games where it's not going to happen. You're going to want either like a 5 or 6 cost to play. You could play something like Donald Duck Detective. I think it has some validity. You could play the Max Goof. There's cards where you go Cindy into that. The next turn you can sing. You can play a Clara as like a 7 cost, and you don't have to worry about the shift. And you can play or sing with Cindy a like Mother Knows Best or a You're Welcome, and then you quest with Max Goof and you get the double bounce. That's fantastic as well. Unfortunate thing is that doesn't happen super frequently. I think maybe Max Goof is better in some situations, but the John Silver I think is actually a little bit better than what you guys were leading on to. There's plenty of games where you're on the draw and like, if you don't have the Clara shift, like it's a way that you're not just out of the game. You freeze up 1 quest on like a 2 quester versus like Purple Steel, like a Genie or something, for 1 turn. Then he buys you a turn to do Clara. The John Silver will just every turn after freeze up a quest is like actually fairly reasonable. I think I would rather like see, cut a copy of the Basil and put out like a 3rd copy of John Silver in this type of list that doesn't play something else in replacement of that. It's also like something versus like the Dogs deck, the games where you do stabilize. He's like a way that you can actually close up the game and have like 2 consistent answers per turn, which is like typically what you're going to have to answer at the end of a game where you're trying to stop them from questing for that extra 2 to 3 lore. So I think he actually is like fairly good. I think you'd for sure have to put something in place of him. You can play another Cindy in certain matchups, but that's pretty slow. Like after a turn 3 Cindy, you can play a Donald like after a Cindy, which is fine too, and it draws you cards. Sometimes that is better in certain situations and matchups where you're just trying to hard play into Clara. But he is like kind of like just an answer, like if you're in a pinch, like if you miss your Clara stuff, you need to be doing something somewhat strong. So I think he's like fine.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Actually, just a point you made there about like, you'd be happy to put a Basil to try play more. I think that's what I did in Milwaukee. I think I was on 3 Basils. Like I think this 7 cost Basil is a very good card, but I think like the difference between playing like 3 or 4 of it is like I don't know, like I think people can definitely cut it if they're trying to make room within the deck, right? Like Green Blue is a deck that is pretty, in my opinion, it's always been difficult to try and make room for specific things or specific counts or ratios of what you want. I think cutting something like the 7 cost Basil is perfectly reasonable. Not cutting it completely, like cutting like maybe a copy or 2.
Sure, yeah, it's definitely a good card, but it's a card that is only good after you establish a Clara.
Yeah.
Like if you establish a Clara, you probably have 1 bounce song that happens, so you're probably in a really good spot, and like it compounds that. But there's plenty of games where you don't have to like answer with a Basil plus another bounce to be in an even better spot. Like you're probably like fairly close to combo. You just ink a couple turns, play a couple things, and like having the combo just closes it out. You don't really need to like double bounce again after the Clara turn. So
yeah. And the Blue-green was a deck that was super, super dominant in the CCQ. It put 6 copies into the top 16, 3 copies into the top 8, before ultimately being taken down in the finals. I think it is a very strong choice moving forward. I think it's something that people have kind of strayed away from just because the deck, like, it feels bad when you lose because you feel like you did nothing. But I think in the current meta, especially since Blurple has been doing well in a lot of the CCQs and so on, and it's a deck that people like to bring, I think a deck like Blue Green is going to be very well positioned moving forward in the meta. Another one of the lists in this top 8 was the same list that we've been showing before, that we've shown the last 2 weeks, that Ed brought to the first week of LCCC, and then somebody got second place at a tournament last week. It was also in the top 8 of this, so if you don't want to buy Cinderellas, then you can still play that week. We're just not going to show it again because we've shown it for 2 weeks in a row.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think the final thing, just before we move on to one of the last deck lists, is kind of what you just said, Sky, about Under the Sea and Dogs. Like, is Under the Sea a card that we could take out of green blue, or do you think it's still necessary to play the 2 copies? Like, because
I've already taken it out. I took it off day one that I started testing this deck. Like, I'm certainly am not comfortable taking 2 Under the Sea, 1 Bend to My Will, and 4 Hades. Like, that's just way too much uninkable stuff, especially if you're going to play something like Mother Knows Best. Like, if you just do the math on, like, playing all that plus a Cindy, like, this deck is so make or break it on the turns where you need to go down to, like, 2 cards and then have a Clara shift that, like, if there's any sort of, like, -% that gets dragged onto this because of, like, a greedy uninkable count, like, it's really, really bad. Like, that just loses you games, like, straight up. So I think you got to be really careful and make sure that these utility cards, like, are meaningful and are meaningful enough. And if Dogs is, like, the only matchup, like, even if it's like an auto win if you hit a card, like, you still got to do the math on if that's worth, because, like, what is Dogs, like, 8, 9%, 10% max? Like, that's still not great for a card that's going to just drag you down in all of their spots. And Bend is, like, a card that I hate so much right now because I don't want to play it at all. There's still plenty of games where, like, in the mirror you're going first and you don't need it all, and it's really only in the mirror that you need the card. But, like, it feels so bad when your opponent just hits the early Bend and they were going second, they should have lost the game, but because they hit it, they turn it and they win it. So, like, I don't know. I'm still undecided if I were to bring Blue Green to a tournament, would I play Ben? I'm not sure, because, like, all the other matchups, like, people are smart enough to where Ben is going to get no value, and if you're getting value out of Ben, you just won the game already because of Clara draws. So, like, it's a very, I don't know. I don't like the card at all.
I miss playing some stopped Thiago in his tracks. I miss playing that card in my green blue deck, man. That was the card, man. But Purple Steel now is just playing. Like, it's playing so many 4/4s though,
maybe
bro.
I need to respect that card a little bit more.
I don't know. I just think, like, so many Lexingtons, so many stuff. I mean, Thiago, are you still afraid of that card or no? Not anymore.
More or less. I'm playing that card in my LCCC deck though, in my green purple deck. So it's been kind of lit. Like, I played against red purple and it hits everything in that deck, and I was able to, like, bounce a bunch of stuff. Then Clarabelle, like, draw 8 cards or something, and then bend him the next turn. It was, like, completely insane. So I'm making use of it.
Yeah, Sky's going to be testing that next. He's going to go off the pod instantly, put Stop Chaos on his track.
2 is a lot different than a wipe in the Purple Steel matchup, though. I will say that.
So yeah, that's the end of the episode. Thank you guys for sticking with us through all the decks. Sky had to pop out early, unfortunately, but really appreciate all of you guys sticking with us. Apologies, I will say, throughout the video, there'll be a couple of camera cuts and stuff. Still adjusting to moving back and getting everything set up correctly. But Thiago, I want to thank you specifically for taking the time to actually come onto the podcast, because I know, as I said, you're probably exhausted from your travel. You're an absolute madman. You're even still going to CCS this weekend, which is crazy. So I wish you the best of luck at that event. And as I said as well, I'm looking forward to hanging out with you again in Richmond. Hopefully, I can do even better than I did in Milwaukee. And it would be very, very cool to, potentially get a place at Continentals. Or at least for me, it's always about improving regardless of the finish. If I feel like I played well as well, that's what's the most important to me. But yeah, any final thoughts before we close things out? Maybe you could just say a few words about some final words about Singapore, and yeah, just congrats once again on getting the Golden Mickey, man. It must be like a very big accomplishment for you.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about it, but at the end of the day, it's like, just there's more tournaments coming up, more stuff to refocus for. So yeah, I want to thank everybody who I met in Singapore, who's, like, just genuinely, like, the most lovely people. So it really made, like, that trip so special to me. It was, like, one of my favorite trips I've ever been on in my entire life. So
wow.
That was really awesome. and yeah, we're heading out to CCS in like, I don't know, maybe like 10 hours or something. So I like arrived just now at yesterday night. I like had 15 errands to run today, and then like I'm leaving in 10 hours again. So I've done zero practice, zero preparation, zero nothing. It just is what it is at this point. Like I'm honestly dying to cancel my plane ticket, but at this point I'm just gonna power through. But yeah, for Richmond, I'll be well rested and ready to go. I'll be excited to see you, excited to meet up. Maybe we'll do something with all of the pod gang. So just one more week, and then on a little bit of a break. I'll imagine I will have a guide out maybe on December 13th tentatively, and then I've been getting dozens and dozens of messages about coaching. I'm like, it just does not fit with my schedule very well, but I will try to, between December 15th and the 22nd, I will open about 100 hours and just like fully grind it out for the people who have been asking me for that. And then I don't know if it'll be open again really ever after that. So those are the things coming up for me, but yeah.
Absolute god, man. You're an absolute god. You know, you don't rest, bro. You've been to all these tournaments. It's like, let's put out the Metafight guide. Let's get some coaching in. Man,
I got it,
don't know how
man.
you guys
People
do it.
people wanna play Purple Steel, dude. I gotta do it for the people.
For the people, indeed. Well, thank you guys again for watching. As I said, I've also been crazy busy with this transfer to like my new job, moving home. Very happy to be home. Excited to get deeper into Lorcana over the Christmas period again. There should be some cool stuff we can talk about over the next few weeks. Obviously, we'll be reviewing CCS and, you know, some other tournaments. But I know last year we took like a week or two off around the Christmas period for the podcast. We might do that again. Honestly, it's just good for all of us to rest, recoup, and then come back strong for Richmond. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much. If you guys enjoyed the episode, number one thing you can do is leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your local podcast platform. The video version is available over on youtube.com/@PodcanaPodcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. Twitters are Thiago XS23, at Sky Lorcana, and at Kawatech_CG. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will catch you in the next one.